2, 1. Cuisine, comedy, media, technology, and the business of culture. Full disclosure, and we are live with the Inn at Little Washington's chef, Patrick O'Connell. That's right. On stage with me at the Virginia Museum of History and Culture, one of the culinary world's most decorated talents. He's like the Tom Brady of Michelin, James Beard, Mobile, Zagat, you name it. He's goated all of them. The octogenarian renegade who turned a sleepy road in rural Virginia into an international destination. So many stories. Stick around. Full Disclosure airs on NPR, Spotify, YouTube, all of the fine podcatchers. I put them in one neat link for you, fulldradio.com. Again, fulldradio.com. A shout out to our radio listeners on WVTF Radio IQ, Virginia's NPR news source. You could catch us in Asheville, North Carolina. We're on WPVM. Out west on KPPQ in Ventura, California. Holler if you too would like us on your air. Joining me on stage at the Virginia Museum of History and Culture in Richmond is Chef Patrick O'Connell, a self-taught chef who pioneered a regional American cuisine in a tiny Virginia village 67 miles west of D.C. He is a recipient of 3 Michelin stars, one of only 13 such restaurants in the U.S. Please join me again in welcoming him. Thank you, Chef. Thank you to the Virginia Museum of History and Culture. For those listening and using your imagination to kind of conjure this, we actually have a little table together on stage that the Inn at Little Washington wanted to set up. So you probably would do most justice to this by watching it on YouTube, even though I have a face for radio. That's quite okay. Thank you, Chef.
Thank you. I always like to travel with a little table and a waiter nearby. I get hungry at the oddest times.
Let me share that I understand that a copy of your forthcoming memoir fell off a Ryder truck, and I got to see a couple of chapters of it. And I'm going to throw a jump ball out at you from your misspent teenage years. You cannot have the gold, Patrick O'Connell. Tell me what that was. Tell me why it stung. Tell me about you at age 15.
We're getting in the Wayback Machine, I see here. We don't even want to know what year that was, but my parents thought I read too much, and I should be outside more often with my brothers playing hoops or whatever they played. But I like to lose myself in narratives and stories. My favorites were novels that encompassed an entire lifetime. And I thought they were so instructive and so absolutely fascinating to imagine your whole life playing out in a book. And you couldn't imagine what would happen as a young person turned, I'm an octogenarian.
That was my way of saying happy 80th birthday. I don't know.
I'll accept it. I see a few of my octogenarian friends out there. Still crazy after all these years. So I was taken to a psychologist, as one did with people who weren't like everybody else. So my mother diagnosed me as not having a good grasp on reality. Later on in life, I told her I thought it had served me well. So I walked into a little office. It was a cubicle, really. It was cinder block, as everything seemed to be in my era. All high schools and colleges and elementary schools were cinder block painted yellow, and you could sit and count the little holes in the cinder blocks. So I was ushered in, I sat down, and had no idea what to expect. But it was a sort of a wizened, older man who had an indistinguishable accent. And he looked at me, he had little glasses, and he said, "First question, do you understand that when you go to the movies, you cannot have the gold in the movies?" And I said, "Oh, yes, I can." And I just realized this guy was a whack job.
You also talk, I mean, there's some interesting stuff. I don't know if you shared it in another interview, but you read in, I guess, a women's magazine, if you have thoughts of self-harm or everything, you should take up cooking. I don't know. I mean, it was a whole different time. I mean,
It was such a different time. If a young lady or an older lady was ever feeling suicidal, bake cookies. Fills the house with beautiful fragrance. You have a sense of purpose and accomplishment, and your friends will come over and eat hot cookies. Whose wouldn't? So I thought, we have a remedy for everything.
Chef, how did you end up at Mr. H's, Mr. Hardesty's? I remember you and I met at the Virginia Film Festival. It was 2019, a fond pre-pandemic memory. And in that documentary on PBS, you talked about your kind of culinary coming of age. This is before mass-produced Fortune 500 foods that were delivered to restaurants. This is where you would make the coleslaw by hand. You'd whip the eggs. You'd do all these things. It was an interesting time where, by all measures, it seems like your head was in cinema or other creative pursuits or theater.
Well, I think so many young people have, at a certain age, not yet figured out that they are food people. And those of us who finally figured that out and are food people know another food person immediately. It's like theater people, they gravitate, but food people are a particular breed. So I was a paper boy and in a rural route, and there were a lot of dogs. And I was bit almost every day. And I carried little rocks in the basket up front with the paper. And that deterred them for a minute or two. I could move, I'd get the paper and go on. But there was this one massive black and tan German Shepherd named Rex. And I knew he was going to be the end of me one day. And I thought about, friends suggested carrying a squirt gun with ammonia in it. But I didn't resort to that. I had principles. So he finally bit me right here. And I thought, okay, that's it. And I rode my bike up to a little carryout, which was a new concept. Can you imagine? I'm that old that a carryout didn't exist. And it was Mr. H hamburgers. And it was seedy and greasy, smelled delicious. And I tapped on the back screen door. I was probably about that high. The door opened, this gruff, tough man said, "What do you want?" And I said, "I'm looking for a job." And he said, "Oh, well, come on in." And I took my first breath of restaurant aroma, and it was fabulous. And then everybody was polishing the counters and busily working. And they all looked at me like, wow, a normal kid wants to work here. Little did they know. So he said, "When can you start?" And I said, "When would you like me to start?" "Oh, how about tomorrow, 4:00? And so I said, "Okay, all right." I realized I had my picture in the newspaper because I just won the Voice of Democracy contest, whatever that was. I think I wrote a poem about democracy. But anyway, I went home and they thought, wow, they had snagged somebody who was up and coming, a middle-class kid. So I went home and I said, "I got a job, I'm not doing the paper route anymore." And my parents blew up. "Where?" I said, "Mr. H Hamburgers." "Oh, you can't work there. Those people." I mean, it's disreputable. Some of them just live off of tips. Like,
What was your starting salary? You have to remember.
in those days, it was generally 75 cents to $1 an hour. But you got a meal, and that was a burger. And you could take your dinner break out back, and you would build a little chair out of the either Coke crates or plastic milk carton things. And you'd sit there and you'd have this most delicious burger or steak sandwich. The steak was as thin as construction paper. And one night, a bad boy said to me, "You going on your break?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "What are you going to have?" I said, I think I'll have a steak sandwich." He said, "Put 2 on there, he'll never know." 2 pieces of construction paper. Somebody tattled on me and told Mr. H that I was eating 2 steak sandwiches on my break. He blew up. Let me have it. What I was doing to his profits. And I thought, 2 pieces of construction paper, wow. So I never did that again, ever, 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 ever. But with the characters who I met there, who I often say were paying a debt they didn't owe somehow. And they had bulletproof smiles, but hearts of gold. And I realized, these are my people. So at that point, I thought, this is where I belong. My parents felt otherwise.
But you applied to college.
I did. They insisted. Absolutely, they insisted. Would you care for a sip of wine?
Sure.
Okay. Yes, I went to Catholic University. A little theater group in Clinton, Maryland, gave me a scholarship. It was probably $300, but it was a lot for them. Thank you, thank you. So, to the Wayback Machine.
Thank you.
Okay. And I went to the National Pontifical Catholic University of America, and Latin was a 4-year requirement. Gentlemen wore ties to get in any of the dorms or classrooms. And it was, if you couldn't make the leap to go to the seminary immediately, you went to Catholic University. So since, what do you call this show? Truth something or other?
Full disclosure.
Full disclosure.
You just haven't even started the wine.
Full disclosure, I ran away with a seminarian.
So, Chef, I want to go back to Mr. H's burgers. And I'll say when I was similarly at a quarter-life crisis, out of college in those early 20s, where you don't know what you're doing, you try to go back to something, a point where you had passion, where there was a joie de vivre. And did you actually really revisit Chef H, that experience, and say, maybe I need to reorient myself back onto the culinary track?
No, it was a circuitous, roundabout kind of journey. But I think it's important that everyone who is a food person or in the food world knows that high, low, medium, whatever, it's all the same. It's making people happy. It's giving of yourself. It's hospitality. And it's a noble pursuit and profession, however you enter it. It's finally, in our country, beginning to get a little of its due. But when I finally was perplexed by finding myself, my spot, my space, a wise man suggested I go off. It was actually my professor. He said, "Would you like to go to lunch?" And I said, "A lunch? Okay." So we went to Jenny's Chinese basement. I was, at that time, in and out of school, but at George Washington University. So his opening question was, "What are you doing here?" And I said, well, I'm actually, I've stopped going to all of the classes because they're so boring. I'm only here for your class. He was an English literature teacher. and creative writing. And he said, "You don't need this. You're wasting your time. You should be off seeing the world, exploring. You want to get stuck here? Like me? I've been stuck here for 14 years. And I thought, what's going on here? And he said, "You're bright. You can do something with your life." And I thought, wow, quite a departure. You hear all these different things at that age, and you have to process them very carefully. It only took me about a week to find a ticket on the SS France steerage, which was, I think, inexpensive at that time. But I was working in restaurants while I was at college. And I went to France. And the night before, I decided to go to an astrologist. And in those days, we put a lot of stock in what an astrologer might say. And this was an old one. She was wise. And she was an octogenarian. All of us are wise. We just forget what we're wise about sometimes. So she said, "Okay, look, you want to make a lot of money? It's easy. Become an interior designer. You just make as much money as you want." But she said, "Food is all over your chart. Food, food, food. Everywhere I look, there's food on your chart. Does that mean something to you?" Can you imagine? I was about 21 and I still hadn't realized that food was a calling. So I said, "Well, you know, I worked in restaurants for a long time and now I'm going to France." And she said, "Well, don't put that out of your mind. Think about that." And she said, "One other tip, don't do drugs." I wanted to say, "Too late, honey." And I said, "Really?" And she said, "Let me explain. Drugs, mind-altering drugs, open the pineal gland." And she demonstrated with her finger. And I thought, this is really weird. And she said, "Your pineal gland is already fully opened." And she said, "If you take drugs, that pineal gland might never close. And you could become suicidal." And I thought, then I'd have to bake cookies.
Full truth, something or another. I'm Roben Farzad. We're joined on stage by Chef Patrick O'Connell and his pineal gland. He is the much decorated chef from the Inn at Little Washington, just 65 or so miles outside of Washington, D.C. One of the most celebrated restaurants on the planet. He's been called the Pope of American cuisine. You could call him the Tom Brady of American cuisine, of all cuisine. Sir, I have to fast forward you to the 1970s because at that point you were a caterer, but you know, as demonstrated in this little movie and your documentary on PBS several years ago and everything that you've written, you know, you remind me of this song by Air Supply, "Making Love Out of Nothing at All." You might not remember that song.
Oh, I do, of course.
But you showed up at this, abandoned Standard gas station in the 1970s. Like, what kind of delusion was that? This that you could build what you wanted to build there, right? Considering your biography, considering the resources that were there. Yes, you're an hour out from DC, but what were you smoking back then?
Anything I could get my hands on. You know, you've touched a nerve. The idea of making something out of nothing is what cooking and magic are. And so I had a maternal grandmother, as she was a Depression-era housewife. And in those days, you had a little vegetable patch, and you had your strawberries and your grape arbor and your rhubarb just outside the kitchen door. And she would take her little frilly apron, and she'd go out, and she'd put a bunch of things in the apron and toddle back in. And she'd make 2 pies. So as a little kid, I thought, she's a magic person. She can make something out of nothing. And if ever you were on a drive with her, she'd immediately, when she saw an apple orchard, call the car to be stopped, and then she'd collect the rotten apples. They make the best sauce. And so I thought, wow, this is like magic. So when my mother grew up, she would skip home from school, find the door locked, having to take a pee. She'd be pissed. And her mother would say, through the door, skip on down to the butcher shop and ask for a little piece of liver for the cat. They didn't have a cat. My mother knew they didn't have a cat. The butcher knew they didn't have a cat. And so then she'd go embarrass herself and ask for a little piece of the liver for the cat. Butcher'd say, oh, yeah, we got your number here. My grandmother would make a lovely liver and mushroom casserole with rice for 12. And I thought, wow, this is truly like magic. So as a kid, with all these big burly brothers, I would sit in the back seat of our 1949 Ford, and there was a no draft, the triangular window in the back. I think it was the best automobile invention of all time. You opened it and the wind didn't blow right in your nostrils. So like a little dog, I stuck my nose out the no draft. They punched one another, beat the hell out of each other all the way to the countryside where we were going on a trip. And I had a secret little game that I never, ever told anyone about. And I guess if you had to name it, you'd call it the finger game. But by lifting one finger in front of my face, I was magically able to erase anything from the landscape that I found offensive. I erased whole towns. I think Front Royal was lost. But if ever I saw something, a nice old church or a beautiful barn, I dropped the finger. But when I erased, everything reverted into virgin forest. But imagine the Catholic guilt I had to suffer thinking about the little children who skipped home from school to find their trailer not there anymore. But I justified it because I felt that ugliness was a blight. And I was doing a public service to the world. But I put it out of my mind until one day, probably only 15 years ago, I was behind one of our large old buildings in town, and I was surveying the landscape. And there was something like a shed back there, and I went, and I thought, oh my God, I'm still playing the finger game. But now I'm doing it in reality. And I have been obliterating horrible things all my life and reimagining them. So,
well, who tipped you off to this service station?
Well,
I mean, how did that opportunity even end up on your lap?
When I ran away for the 13th time, trying to figure out where my spot in the universe might be.
Thank you.
What are we having? We have a little quiche. Oh, a baby quiche. I'm a food person. I met an interesting group from a commune. It was a different era. And they were endeavoring to create a utopian community. And they had acquired a certain 300 acres. And they were hoping that other people would buy contiguous property and we'd have a larger growing utopia right in Virginia. And we'd live blissfully ever after.
Like a kibbutz?
I haven't been to a kibbutz, but like a kibbutz, yeah, why not? So to encourage all people, as one wanted to do in those days, 150 acres was set aside as what was called the Free State. And anyone was welcome who heard about it, whatever, to come there and homestead. And so there were runaways, there were mental patients who'd escaped from institutions, there were divorcees who landed there wearing a tiara in a convertible and passed out. But the lodging of choice turned out to be a dugout the size of a human body with a piece of corrugated tin across the top covered with leaves. And at nighttime, you pulled the roof across, you were invisible. And no one could find you. They might step on your roof in the woods, but this was bold thinking. It proved to young people that they needed nothing. And one of the mottos was, "He is richest who needs the least." So I bought a contiguous piece of property, an abandoned farm. It hadn't been lived in for 10 years. A river ran through the front. The back was surrounded by Shenandoah National Park. And something happened at that point. I knew that that was my spot in the universe where I belonged. And if I embraced it, I had nothing to worry about. Everything would fall into place. And then I met Julia Child. I went to an event, a charity event at Mount Vernon for the Mount Vernon Ladies Association that Julia was doing a cooking demo. I read it in the paper and went, oh my God. She had essentially, through her books, made me fall in love with French cuisine and French cooking. So I was there, timid, shy, awkward, and listened to her fascinating program. And afterwards, you could get and meet her, and she'd sign your book. So I went nervously up to her and said, and said, I love your book. I have a little catering company. By then I had a sort of a toy catering company using a wood-burning cook stove and an electric frying pan that I bought for $1.89 at a yard sale. You can do anything in an electric frying pan. If you don't have one, get one. So I said, yes, I'm using all your recipes, but I blurted out, I'm not making any money. And then her response was, but you will. And it was at that moment I really felt that I heard the voice of God. And I had nothing. I would never worry about money again. I still don't. The mortgages just keep getting larger.
January of 1978 and that auspicious, I guess inauspicious snowstorm. What kind of money did you have in the bank? What kind of startup costs were there? And I always, in talking to all-star chefs, like there's always this beta testing. You bring friends and family, you show the rough edges, just the soft open between that time that you had that small catering business and the grand opening in January of 78. Walk me through that.
Well, the little catering company out of the farmhouse with the wood-burning stove grew, and people were desperate out there. The nearest grocery was 40 miles away. They ate mostly stale ham biscuits, and entertaining was arduous. So when they found out somebody would cook for them in their house, but what we didn't realize at the time was all the guests showed up at every single party, the same little 50 family group. So you had to make it different, but that was a good challenge to have. So they encouraged us to open a restaurant. And
is there any sort of crowdfunding or people chipping in?
Unfortunately, they weren't going to gamble that much. But my mother, I'm supposed to say, if I was in the South, bless her heart, said to me, now, dear, if things don't work according to plan, you could always sell that delicious granola you make door to door. There were 120 people living in Washington, Virginia at the time, and I pictured how many door-to-door sales that would compute to. So we found a banker who had been to one of our parties, and he was a believer. And, well, the risk was paying the rent of $200 a month.
The risk is it's 1978. The economy's harsh. You know, I mean,
It's been
startup
harsh
capital.
every 5 years. You get used to it.
Yeah.
Where there's a gas shortage, there's a war, there's a recession, there's something. When you're in business 47 years, what haven't you seen? You know, in terms of the economy, the craziness, whatever. And you just think this too will pass. You just go right on. You stay the course. And that's what I've always felt I should do.
It's legend now that shortly after that grand opening in January of 78, you get this glowing review. It was at the Washington Star. Somebody came in as a secret diner and absolutely raved about you. It was a different media consumption environment. There's no Instagram. There are no influencers passing through. I can't imagine what the scene was in DC. It's post-Watergate. You know, Jimmy Carter's there. But where were you? Do you remember this diner? Do you remember where you were when, I guess, somebody called you and said, Patrick, you got raves?
Well, in those days, I answered the phone and took reservations at the stove on a very long cord. So I would always get a crick in my neck because, I'd be making the hollandaise and holding the phone at the same time. And you could tell by their accents if they were local or not. And this person, I answered the phone and he said, I'd like to come at 5 o'clock, party of 2. And I said to myself, he's a critic. And so I had a partner at the time. I said, a critic called. And he said, what do you mean a critic called? Did he tell you he was a critic? I said, no. How do you know? I just know. And so he arrived, and he said, nobody eats at 5 o'clock. A critic's not going to eat at 5 o'clock. Anyway, 2 gentlemen came in. They sat down. And at the end of the meal, he said, may I see the chef? And I came out and he said, I want you to know I never do this, ever. But I'm going to introduce myself. I want to because I'm worried for you. And he said, do you really want me to write this review? And I said, well, it's taken us a lot of time to get this place open, and we'd, I think, be very happy if more people knew we were here. And he said, no, because if I say what I'm going to say in the review, your life is going to change. And I said, I wanted to say, bring it on. Getting tired of bathing in that river. That corrugated roof.
What did you serve him? What was on his plate that night? What was the staging like?
Scallopini o Calvados. Escalope de veau o Calvados. In those days, you couldn't serve American food because people thought it was fried chicken and ham, and you could only charge $1.95. So you had to use French terminology. And so since I was inspired by Julia's recipes, it was easy. And he said, because if I write this review, I'm going to say this place is fantastic and unbelievable. And I went, oh, okay. So his review came out on a Sunday. And later I found out my mother read it to my father in bed, and they both cried. Dinner was still $4.95. And so was he ever right? We tried to eat our granola that morning and found ourselves unable to do it because the phone rang constantly. And then a cloud of people lined up on the front porch around 11. We opened at 4. And they started, I felt like this was a real nightmare. I felt bodies thumping against this old clapboard building. And it was like throbbing. And I peeked out and I thought, they're going to crash in on us. And there was a little old side door. There was a junkyard originally next door. There was still in place, had a dime store deadbolt on it. One bolt for the door, exterior door. And they got one person to go around the corner and start throwing his body against the door. They were hungry. $4.95, I'll wait in line. So I just ran back to the kitchen and I started working as fast as I possibly could. And I didn't come up for air for 10 years.
Let me... Let me fast forward everybody by way of illustration from 1978. That was January of 78. I'm taking you to October of 2019. This was, you were doing the Virginia Film Festival, and that's where I met you and we talked on stage, but you insisted on my coming to the inn, I guess that Thursday night. And let me tell everyone that it was the apotheosis of imposter syndrome for me. You know, I walk in my Joseph A. Banks suit. You're there greeting me in the parlor with your truffle popcorn, making me like a bespoke. I know you had an Intel file on me. This was the revelation that I had when I was in there was like, am I the customer or am I the product? I feel like everybody's watching me. And then I lost it between the dad jokes and the guy pushing in the plastic cow and suggesting all these cheese things to me. And then my bespoke adult Happy Meal box to go and the printed menu and everything. You are quite the choreographer, right? And the filmmaker person, the cue this, the cue that, like everything was meticulous. And look, me, I just took some rural routes. I went up, I passed the Royal Farms, a Wawa, this, and suddenly there's like this Disney World culinary kingdom in the middle of nowhere. And I still can't get that out of my head. So everything that transpired between people banging on your door in 78 and what I experienced in 2019.
Time to come back. We've evolved. No, I think it's so important that every single person who arrives on your doorstep or to your restaurant feels momentarily like the most important person in the world. Because without them, you can't pay your rent. And they deserve that. So it's not that difficult. For example, if you dine in our kitchen, when you arrive, I want a different atmosphere in the kitchen than in the main dining room. There's an altar boy with incense, and he's incensing you in, and the entire team is lined up, waiting to greet you. And it doesn't cost us anything, but it creates a lasting memory for people. And I think what we crave, what we need, is a connection and a lasting memory that we go to our grave with. Somebody once said that on your deathbed, in another 50 years for all of us, you will reflect on the best, most wonderful meal of your life. And you treasure that little memory. So the tragedy of our profession is that you work all day, and nowadays everybody tweezes the food into beautiful artistic designs, whatever on the plate. And you hold your breath, and it goes out. Somebody goes, it's good. It's all gone in a heartbeat, in a second. All that effort, 36 people working in the kitchen now, and a farmer just growing all these wonderful little things. And it's just consumed. You have no trace of it, but you have that ineffable, indelible memory that makes it that much more precious than a piece of art that you hang on your wall in the kitchen and get tired of. You never get tired of your treasured memories. You bring them out to comfort yourself. We all store them in the cupboards of our minds and go to them on a really crappy day when you just need a little joy. And there they are, forever.
It's like you're a filmmaker, a dream weaver. It goes back to that desire to be a creative, a choreographer. I mean, it's where it's interesting. You might have taken this turn, but Julia Child and the astrologist told you to stick with it.
Well, I think for me, success has been taking all the disparate talents or fascinations or things that turn you on and weaving them into one giant tapestry that incorporates them all and enhances them all. So I meet a lot of young chefs, and their focus is laser on the plate. And I often think, well, that's all wonderful. You got the plate, but you take it out into that room with ghastly lighting, and you set it down, and the room is hideous. And how are you supposed to be carried away, swept away, and transported, even though the food's very good, without the whole picture? So I regard every day of my life as a film. And it's extremely helpful in training people in our operation, because I walk around with my little camera, my imaginary camera, and I just say, oh, yes, you're right away. I'll get it. If something's on the floor, doesn't belong there. And sometimes I have to say, move that trash can. I don't want that in my movie. And they run and they move the trash can. But I'm a visual person, in case you hadn't guessed. But we're all living in our own movie. We're all directing it, crafting it, imagining it. You're all responsible for everything that's ever happened to you. That's the way I feel. It's your thing, and you can change it if you feel that you want to. Nobody wants to take the responsibility for their life, it seems. There's too much opportunity to say, well, I would have done this, that, the other, except for that happened to me. Or we want to be victims. So if there's a message I have to the world, it's, you're not a victim of anything, anytime, any place. It's your show. Just. So let's bring somebody up to the show.
Full disclosure live, I'm Roben Farzad. We are joined on stage with glasses and wine and food and amuse-bouche by Chef Patrick O'Connell, chef and sole proprietor of the Inn at Little Washington, Virginia's only 3-star Michelin restaurant. It's winner of the James Beard Lifetime Achievement Award. You've been honored, gosh, by every survey, every guide. You've been honored and given a medal at the White House. I have to ask you, and this was a bit of an uncomfortable question when I met you 6 years ago, and you'll be self-effacing about it. Do you ever consider yourself as a kind of a civil rights pioneer? You blazed the trail in the South, and maybe there was a kumbaya communal spirit about it, but you and your partner went there and built something, and you asserted your will onto this, right? And it could not have been all hunky-dory and cheerful and roses and happiness.
There were death threats. And sometimes I had to say to myself that perhaps the inn was like an exotic plant that had to be planted in parched, harsh soil conditions in order to flourish. But I think it was part of the magic that it doesn't matter where, if you want to do your thing and you believe in it, just do it. So I always like the quote supposedly from Shakespeare that the purpose of life is to find your gift, and the meaning of life is to give it away.
Who advised you into this? Where was that conversation, that vision quest? It clearly wasn't the strange guy in the yellow cinder block giving you bad pseudo-psychological advice. Like, where did you get this true north? I'm getting little bits and pieces of it between Julia Child and the astrologers. And then I'm the dugout with the clapboard thick on it. And suddenly you have this conviction, I'm going to bring myself hell or high water and assert myself.
Well, like cobbling together your own interests or your own talents, I've also cobbled together all of the advice, ideas, and things that I've learned from others along the way, often sometimes contradictory. But part of my unusual childhood condition was a sense, magically, that I did not have the normal physical boundaries that it appeared other people had. I could float in and out. And as a person said to me, "You're not empathic, you are an empath." And I thought, okay, never thought too much about the distinction, but I can slide into another person's psyche and hope to be able to extract myself. So part of the problem in theater for me was, you want to become the character, but you have to then disengage yourself to get back. And sometimes I'm sure all of you octogenarians have gone to a movie, and at the end you are one of the characters. You can't shake it for a little while. You got to go have a drink, and you're sometimes surprised by which character you inhabited for that ever so brief moment. But I realized that not everybody had that curse or gift. Often they're the same, flip sides of the same coin. But my mantra to our staff right now is that what we do is so simple. Just become the guest. And they go, and you get inside the guest's head, you feel what the guest is feeling, and they will tell you everything. Somebody once said that an experienced waiter should be able to approach a table of two, and after the first 15 minutes, write a pretty good biography of the person. And that sounds ballsy, but try it. I mean, what waiters see and what they know is astonishing. The secret is that you're observing, in the course of an evening, 100 people in your space, all reacting to different stimuli, and you're reading their reactions. They're communicating this to you, and you're knowing them. So it's heavy stuff.
I'm going to give you another chance to answer this, but have you ever had and acted on the urge to sneak out of the back of this rarefied, clean eating culinary destination and just go downhill and get a nasty Popeye sandwich or something approaching Mr. Hardesty's burgers? Like, how do you just the yin to that yang? But you were very adamant about saying no, that it just does not make me feel good. There's nothing attractive about that. I'm clean, I'm thoughtful, I'm meticulous, everything about the chop of the vegetable, the presentation, the sourcing of it, but there's gotta be a part of you who's like, I'm 80, I earned it.
What, I can eat crap because I'm 80, you mean?
No, I mean, do a little Lipitor or Ozempic, but anyway, do you know what I'm saying? Because you pass all these things on the way. How many different sheets and fast food places and truck stops? You did?
A little microwave there, and you think, I guess I could put it. No, for a little while, there was nothing between DC and Little Washington. And there was an all-night 7-Eleven, and I would go in.
I didn't say go that far. But
I would whip myself up a hot chocolate, but this is how I did it. They just give you the powder and the hot water, really. And so then I would go to the creamery, and I would get 6 of those little coffee creamers, and I would put those in until I got caught. You're going to have to pay extra. No, I'm not a food snob, really. The greatest food oftentimes is what you might have in someone's home, what they whipped up. Even if it was, a Duncan Hines cake with something, whatever. But if they put a little love into it and they do it for you and they care, it tastes good. But you never get invited to somebody's house. That's the sad thing. When my mother said, I can never cook for you again, I thought, what has this come to? You cooked for me my whole life. Yes, but not now.
Chef, in the few minutes we have left with you, I have to once again refer to the leaked memoir chapters that I saw because something really piqued my interest in it. You mentioned, this will go deep, but we are full disclosure, and you disclosed that this wolf that you're no longer afraid of, and the armor that you have, and the courage of your convictions, I would be remiss if I didn't ask you about that, because you gave us crumbs along the way of not accepting your body, of people not accepting your verve, your being out there, of being a misfit. Do I go to seminary school? Do I join the church? Do I do this? And now, I'm not going to say at this age, could you imagine your LinkedIn profile, the various things? Like you'd run out of, but you've earned it. No, really, you've earned it. And I have to imagine this conversation you're having with 15, 22, 25-year-old Patrick O'Connell. And tell me more about that wolf.
Well, someone said to me once, another wise person, he said, everyone has a theme in their life or a word that encapsulates their life. What's yours? And I said, without thinking, haunted. And then I realized that from a very early age, probably 4, I took the story of Little Red Riding Hood too seriously. And the wolf came for me every night. And it was a recurring kind of a thing, and I couldn't sleep. Then the wolf morphed into an escaped convict from a nearby Air Force base, and he became the little green man. And he would come every night around about 11:30, midnight. And he would be standing in the kitchen facing my bedroom. So I made my brother sleep closest to the door so he'd get knocked off first. And I slept behind him wide-eyed all night. Every night at a certain moment, the little green man came. And there was a glint and then the little green gun. Every night. And so I realized my brothers would joke with me. Yeah, I saw the little green man last night. And I realized, don't tell anybody about this or they'll cart you off somewhere and it won't be fun and the food will be terrible. So I realized about every 15 or so years, the subject of the haunt, the boogeyman, would morph into something different. So we grow up with, we're all a little haunted, but imagine the sense of a boogeyman. Where does that come from? I mean, so the idea of my life was escaping the inevitable boogeyman. He would either kill you or drive you insane. So you could, like a deer, be so freaked that you'd run right into him and he'd just off you, just like that. So then the boogeyman became slightly more sophisticated. Actually became the bank at one point. What's gonna happen if you don't make that mortgage payment? So then I realized it was fear. And fear was my greatest enemy. And why should we live even a morsel of our lives haunted by fears? We know what's going to happen. I mean, let the worst happen. And just realize that, okay, that happened, but the dread and the fear are worse than any actuality. So each time I have to do one of these, go in front of the public, for like 3 days in advance. I'm like, oh my God, I can't do this. Oh my God, this is awful. Suppose they hate me. Oh my God. I have no idea who I'm pretending to be. I can't do this. And finally somebody said, that's part of your process. And I said, my process? Yeah, that's what you have to do to yourself to get psyched to go in front of the public. Because I've hidden out all these years, so nobody can find me. So now I realize I'm still overcoming sort of one last boogeyman or two. And probably, as all of us, the ultimate boogeyman that we push out of our consciousness all the time is death. But we're all going there. Some happily and some not so happily. So become one with the wolf. Internalize the boogeyman and start terrorizing others. That's what kids are for, isn't it?
Chef Patrick, close us out.
Close
Thoughts,
you out?
Perspective. I mean, no, look, I could fill 2-3 hours of this. And there have been documentaries. You have an upcoming memoir. You no doubt get overtures from all these people that want mentoring and training and the tough love. I can't imagine the number of financial overtures you've turned down. Let's the Wolfgang Puck cutlery series at Target or something. You can't take it down to that level. But this is the conversation. You talk about this wolf, but the conversation you have to be having with yourself in 1977, 1978, with the way you described it, the people pounding down on this little place, and you holding the phone and whipping the reduction and everything. Think about all the calls you get now. Think about the backlog. What would you tell that person? What would you tell the great wide world? You just gave us a morsel on fear, but I'll let you close this out.
Well, there was a very old French chef. There have been many very old French chefs. Somebody once said that ultimately all French chefs will be passed through a fine chinoise strainer. Because much of what we do, fancy sauce, is always passed twice through a chinoise strainer that looks like a Chinaman's hat. And I just love that's how we're all going to go to a beautiful, frothy, lovely, delicate velvet sauce.
Not that much.
What was your question?
I forgot. Yeah. Who do you nominate who should come on Full Disclosure Live? Let's put it that way. Give us a big one, because you have quite the guest list.
You mean guests who come to the inn?
You have plenty of guests at the end. No, somebody who I should feature on Full Disclosure Live. This is a great Ponzi scheme version of my show where I close off, like Abigail Spanberger suggested, the singer Shabuzi. And then you're here now, and I figure you have the ultimate foot in the door. Who should we feature on Full Disclosure Live?
Well, if we just have half a second, I want to pitch my own show. So it opens, it's called Come On to My House. And some of you will remember Rosemary Clooney's old song. Come on to my house, my house, my house, my house, my house.
Extra value is what you get when you buy Coronet. She was the spokeswoman for Coronet paper
She
towels.
was? Yeah. I think he's an octogenarian in disguise. So every week this show goes on. It opens with a door and a beautiful doorbell. Bing, bong. But Come On to My House is playing, the theme song. And then toward the bottom of the door, a tiny little eye key thing opens. It's my dog looking through to see who's at the door. And then that closes, and then I open the door. And it's Bette Midler. And she's ushered in. And it's just a set like this, except this is a psychiatrist's couch in front. And I have a little chair, and I sit behind. And that person lies on the couch, not looking at me, no eye contact. And all we speak about is food and food references and what food means to this possibly celebrity or person. and they start sharing in a way that they don't share when you interview them as a celebrity or whatever. You start talking about what foods they love, what their history of food is, and they reveal more about themselves. And you might have heard 20 interviews with the person, but this one is different. And then I push a button, and behind this screen is a kitchen. And then I proceed to pop into the kitchen with a little help probably from 12 boys and whip up something that is a dish that is from their way back machine. It might have been something they ate in the kibbutz when they were 17 years old. And I prepare it out of research exactly like it was. And they are verklempt.
Do you get a psych copay out of this, I hope?
A what?
A psych copay? I mean, it's like psychotherapist.
Oh, yes. Imagine, you try it sometime with your significant other. Lie down, don't look at them, and just talk about food. And every wonderful food memory or terrible food memory, or what food means to you. And you realize it's our most important touchstone. And then magically to be given a dish. I wish I'd brought yours tonight, but next time we're together.
And bring Bette Midler. I'll have her. Chef Patrick O'Connell, thank you.
Thank you.
Full disclosure, a special shout out to our production team for this live show. Matthew Block, Austin Lewis, Nathan Allen, Zach Kajoyan, Sid Silberman, Andrew Seeger, and Ian Stewart. Thank you to our host, the Virginia Museum of History and Culture, led by Jamie Boskett. What an exceptional staff. It is a joy to work with you. I really hope you'll have me back. Catch this show on NPR, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts, and the footage will be on YouTube shortly. All at one link, fulldradio.com. Again, fulldradio.com. Follow, rate us, recommend us, and catch me every week on both CNN and NPR's Here and Now. Full disclosure, we are small batch, rustically chopped, never hydrogenated, no seed oils, artisanally sourced. I'm Roben Farzad. Bon appetit, and back with you next week.
Thank you so much.